tone of this is obviously like these labs are trying to be very like, oh, like this is how we're pushing humanity forward. We're gonna enable so many people to solve problems, whatever. But it's weirdly rubbing people a lot of the wrong way because it almost seems like the fear mongering narrative has already taken kind of root. And this feels like a little bit of like hypocrisy to a lot of people. Obviously we're in like SF circles, so our like part of the culture maybe feels a little bit different about it. But have y'all seen these ads? Have y'all had a reaction to the sort of presentation that the marketing's trying to do for them?
Yeah, lots of thoughts. Not sure how many ways we want to dice this, but in short, yes, I've seen them. I don't know that I'm personally moved in any one way or the other, but I think you are correct in that the metaphorically the cat's kind of out of the bag here in the sense that people are already anti AI on the general consensus. We're seeing statewide, moratoriums on data centers. We're seeing political activism, kind of, marches in San Francisco against these kind of things. And so I think what Anthropic is trying to do is, as they've kind of always tried to do, is be the counter narrative to the big bad scary AI is coming for your jobs. Now they're kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth because in all their fundraising pitches, it's we're going to take over the entire labor market. Both those things can't be true at the same time. That said, both these companies, Anthropic and OpenAI, are looking at possible IPOs in the reasonably near future. They know they have a PR problem and they're acting to solve it. They're just kind of spamming things in the zeitgeist right now, A/B testing what will work and what won't work. Right, as I can remember the Super Bowl being 4 months ago, and people love that Anthropic commercial that was throwing shade at ChatGPT and their potential route of ads at the time, right? So what has kind of happened, in my personal opinion on this, is when Anthropic was the rival to the market leader that was OpenAI, people wanted to root for that underdog.
Yeah.
They wanted to be on Team Anthropic. They wanted to see them overtake OpenAI because OpenAI was the existential threat. That paradigm flipped when Anthropic kind of became the market leader, at least in the public perception, call it around, I don't know, March of this year, February of this year, so something like that. And so now all of the arrows, so to speak, are out for Anthropic because it is their market positioning to lose. People are seeing that Anthropic has possibly the most capable models right now. There's this kind of political divide around Anthropic with the export controls, right? Both of these teams have kind of chosen their, political proxies, if you will. So this to me just reads as like Anthropic's trying a bunch of stuff. They've got an IPO coming. They know they need to change the public narrative. They're going to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Also, before when you could root for Anthropic as the underdog, they've lost that positioning. So they need to find their footing in something that engenders public trust while still making the arguments they want to make around them being a dominant force in kind of this expanding technology.
I found the ads really interesting in the sense that they took the biggest criticisms that people have, the biggest questions and criticisms, and put them front and center in the ad. The ad kind of has people say in their own words the things they're worried about. And I think the AI market, especially the large language model market, has a PR problem, as Damon said.
Yeah.
This was a real attempt at kind of shifting that PR problem for the whole industry. And this PR problem started when Sam Altman raised capital for OpenAI with the framing that either AI would be done benevolently and would take everyone's jobs, or it would be done malevolently and would destroy the world. And so that kind of initial framing put a lot of fear in the consumer's eyes. It helped them raise a lot of money because it made it seem like this was the biggest thing. And in many ways, it has been the biggest thing. But I think this is an attempt. These ads are an attempt to reframe what AI can be and kind of paint the positive picture, as I can tell. I find the market positioning piece that Damon mentioned really interesting because trust is the single thing that all of these models need. There are three groups of people that they have to win over. They've got to win customers, they've got to win capital allocators, and they've got to win the trust of regulators as well, because regulators have a big say in kind of how this market plays out.
Yeah, I'm
One quick
wondering.
comment.
Go.
Lakshya, sorry to cut you off, but I think it's interesting as Shashi was laying that groundwork to say Dario was at OpenAI at the inflection point that you're talking about. And Dario has been running that marketing playbook since basically GPT 2 or 3, saying like, this thing's so powerful, we got to kind of constrain it. So I do wonder if that's a continuation of the kind of exact same timeline that you've proposed.
Yeah, I find like it's interesting, I think, to like speculate if the dialogue around AI back in the day, like when all this capital raising was happening, like obviously the sort of fear mongering narrative is a very favorable one because your audience is so heavily capital allocators, right? Like you're trying to convince them the market is gigantic because the market's like all of human work, right? But it's like, it's interesting to me to like imagine what the popular general audience would be thinking about AI in the modern day if the narrative was still representative of like, hey, we know what we know now. Like these systems are hairy, like they aren't super perfect. Like in a lot of cases, like yeah, software devs are co-piloting them, but like the rollout of like job wiping is not super common, at least at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think with like even like these conversations we hear about like CEOs who are like kind of stirring the pot with like, oh, we're laying off so many people because of AI, all that sort of stuff is still even a little like fishy. You know, it's like a part of the reason the layoffs are happening, not the full reason. And I think in looking at like the reasons popular sentiment has turned so heavily against AI, part of it is almost part of this like fiction weaved 2 or 3 years ago. You know, I think if you were to like look at like, I mean, even us like practically, like, I don't know how much y'all feel this, but even when I'm using an LLM to do coding work sometimes, like there are moments where I'm like, man, if I just like started this work on my own by hand like 4 weeks ago, you know, it will probably be more progressed in a more intelligent way today. And if that was baked into the narrative back then, you know, like it would just be treated as if we have like a new Microsoft suite, you know, not so much like a like Skynet incoming, which is the narrative that was painted conveniently 40 years ago, but not anymore.
So much of this is about significance, and Sam Altman certainly sees himself as more significant if he's pitching this as Skynet rather than
Hmm.
better Microsoft Office. And
Yeah.
the whole industry sort of relies on attracting the best talent. We've seen recently a wave of talented, high reputation folks going to Anthropic as the perceived winner. So much of this game is about attracting that kind of rare talent, and you don't attract that rare talent when you're pitching, to use the Tesla analogy, better cruise control
Yeah.
doesn't attract that talent, but self-driving cars does attract that talent, even though really on the margins they're kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, I think, to ponder a little bit about like with where we are right now with AI and the way that like Fable has rolled out, the way like Claude like is kind of like almost like scared. It feels to me like a scared reaction to what's happening to Codex, where like the Sol, Terra, Luna models are just a lot cheaper to run. Um, and Fable has kind of had this like overextended stay subsidized for the individual like indie hacker to use. Insofar as like right now, Anthropic's out in front, like objectively, I would say probably. I don't know how long that will be true because the marketing tone of Sol, Terra, and Luna, I think, is still kind of brushing up against like Sam as a person, kind of having lost first place position in like the culture. Um, but it's interesting to see. I think like, especially when Fable was being pitched as like this is like a scary thing that like we can't have a lot of people having, and as part of the rollout plan to reduce the availability of it to some like high paying users effectively. To see almost this like consumer style drag to what the Fable model is in contrast with what the sort of like national security concern, cybersec, ops concern that slowed down this rollout in the first place was.
My only real thoughts on the Fable continued pushback is, I think it's twofold. I think it's what you said. They're afraid they're going to lose market positioning to new releases from Meta, from Grok, from um, OpenAI, and then secondly, they've just secured more compute. They signed a compute contract with XAI, SpaceX AI. Now they've signed a new compute contract with Meta. They now have GPUs to serve this thing. I think it's it's as simple as those two things.
And to expand on that, I wonder how much of a lead Anthropic really has, because the so far the reactions from the OpenAI users, I don't use it for coding. I just use Claude, but the people who I read on X who do say it's really good, and especially good for long running tasks. I've heard really good things about the Grok models. I haven't used them for coding, but I just wonder how much of a lead Anthropic really has, how durable that is, and whether it allows them to charge a premium in price. I don't think it does. I think so far what we've seen with Fable is they keep pushing out the usage boundary of when you can, how long you can use Fable within your max plan before you have to pay API only. And I'm guessing part of that is the competitive pressure of seeing that not only these frontier closed models, but also the ZPU and the other kind of Chinese open models are also kind of winning in their own ways. So I just don't know how much of a lead that Anthropic has and whether it's going to allow them to charge a premium price.
Speaking for myself, like anecdotally, so for the last basically like as long as Fable has been available, I've been running like our video editing and all sorts of stuff through Fable. And so every morning I'd wake up with like my business Amex saying like, okay, you spent like $30 on Anthropic overnight. I'm like, okay, whatever, cool. It's just like we're running the expensive experiment. That's fine. And for the first time, I ran into my API usage limit that I set on my account of like, okay, we should not be spending more than like $500 a month. Like that's crazy for just like a scientific sort of use case on my own like runtime. And I hit it. And what that has pushed me towards, like as a consumer of these tools, is for the first time, like I'm looking at I think Grok and OpenAI have both been fairly clever in how they've marketed their models, in that, yes, you can see the benchmarks kind of slightly underperform Fable, but they pitch their token efficiency as like much, much higher, right? So you can get like what is like a marginally lesser result for like a fifth of the cost on a Grok model or on a Soul model. The benchmarks, again, I mean, Damon kind of said this last time, you can kind of take them with a grain of salt. But if they're serving my use case and I objectively know that I'm getting like a similar tier of performance for gigantic cost efficiency, I moved. So like right now, like as like just before this call, like I had a number of like kind of like tracing systems running that when I'm calling Soul, when I'm calling Fable, I haven't tried the Grok models yet, nor I don't think the meta ones are available, at least the meta ones I'd care to use. But if I'm using any of those, like set up the benchmark of like, here's the most capable thing I've seen you do. Let me throw Soul at it. Let me throw a Grok model at it. And the one that's more token efficient while getting a comparable result is a happy outcome to me. And so does that give Anthropic... Damon has said this before about like, you want the best for running most things depending on what you're doing. But I'm finding, at least at the current moment, I'm pruning back token spend because a lot of the models that are in this like Mythos Fable tier are like marginally different. And that competitive value for like, yes, Fable's the best, but it's the best by like 1 or 2%. In my use case is not enough to justify like allocating all my spend in that direction.
Yeah, the open question to Shashi and both your point is, do the tasks that need to be reserved for the highest intelligence accrue the economic value or not? Like, I'm not going to race with the second fastest car, but the sheer reality is most workflows aren't a race, right? Doing email is not a race. And so like, I'm never going to put my R&D spend on a cheaper model. That defeats the purpose, right? I'm not trying to say which one is second best. So anything that is competitive demands the most intelligence. Or said differently, if I'm competing with anybody in any regime, whatever we're doing, like we're running a race, we're doing finance, we're competing for views, we're running a political campaign, whatever we're doing, I'm not signing up for that race with second best. So the question in my mind isn't whether or not Anthropic has a lead right now. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe it changes. Maybe it's something overtakes it. Maybe they stay in first place. Doesn't really matter. The question that is most interesting to me is, does the economic value accrue to the small subset of tasks that are competitive, or does the bulk of the economic value capture exist in the commodity layer? It's paradoxical to me to think there's going to be economic value in the commodity layer. Those two things are not congruent. So I don't exactly know how to square that. But the question, I think, what we're really driving towards in this conversation is the marginal economic value reserved for the top tier of models big enough to justify the size of these companies? That to me is a fairly
Yeah.
interesting question.
Yeah, I think, I mean, like, even just like pondering, like, I don't know that I have like a certain answer, but like in the idea of economic value, like right now, there is like in my head a splitting between like what are high volume use cases versus like what are the like surgically precise use cases, where like getting the answer right once and for all is where the value lives versus like we need to blitz as many cases as possible. Like, for example, like if you're looking at 11 labs, right, like their valuation is driven by volume, right? It doesn't make sense to like assume that they're running Fable for every single one of their customer use cases, because most of those customer use cases are support as many humans as possible, thus drive economics by volume. But we're talking about like we have this like cancer mRNA that we want to like run transcription for that has a singular answer that works once and for all. It's up to the company calling the model to decide like what is the material worth of that transcription. And if you get it, then use the best model because then that's part of your CAGs effectively.
Yeah, I guess two thoughts. Number one, cost per token is a bad metric. You don't really care about cost per token. What you care about is cost per outcome. I don't care how many tokens it costs. I just need the thing to work, the thing that I want to work. I don't really care to be metered on a token basis. Obviously, it's how we have to meter it now. But what you're really driving towards is not, can I do the most token lifting here? It's, can I get the best result and can I optimize costs on that particular vector? But then just drawing the analogy wider than this, like I don't necessarily think either one of these things have to be true in the sense that I think they both can be. Meaning like Honda has a great business building mass market cars. Ferrari has an excellent business building custom high performance cars. I think we're going to get both. Like, I don't think the answer is either one. I think it's both. Personally, I'd rather be Ferrari. It's a much higher margin. It's a higher valuation. It's a higher performance on the vectors people care about. But people can elect to be Honda. I think that's great too.
I'd like to change gears if you guys are open to it. There are two really interesting Apple stories this week. One is that Apple's suing OpenAI because OpenAI has supposedly been asking, they've been interviewing Apple employees. They've been asking them to bring hardware with them to the interview to talk about, and this could, if true, could be a serious economic legal consequence for OpenAI. And two, it sounds like Apple's car endeavor was pretty serious for almost a decade. Apple had been investing supposedly hundreds of employees for close to a decade in developing a car with the plan of having full self-driving, level 5 full self-driving. Ultimately got to the point where they decided that wasn't viable, but in the making, they developed their own chip trajectory that gave them a hardware advantage in the kind of edge compute, edge AI race that they're now competing in. Any reactions to either of those?
The car one specifically was really interesting to me. I mean, I think like, not to say I'm not surprised by the like Apple OpenAI hardware thing, but like in a weird way, it just kind of feels like natural gravity of things would push into like you have to end up in some gray area given OpenAI has no background in the hardware space. They have Johnny Ive. Apple is like the leader in like consumer hardware design. Like you'd naturally end up bringing a lot of talent. I'm not surprised that like faux pas were committed in the process of trying to set up that ecosystem. Like
it might be a lot more than a faux pas. It may be a $700 billion
yeah.
mistake.
Like morals aside, like it just kind of seems like in my head, like that seems collision prone, if that makes sense. Like any sort of effort in that variety seems very collision prone. The Edge AI thing is very interesting. Like I knew about the Apple Car when they're first talking about it. I wouldn't have like expected that was a lot of the like lead in for like the M series chips, or I guess like a big contributor to the M series chips. We talked about Apple a number of times in a sort of like a yes, they're yielding their like cloud business to a Gemini and partnerships and that sort of thing. But there is absolutely like an argument that edge AI, I think, in a sort of different lane in the way that Damon just referenced it, like people want outcomes. And like if the outcome is really just simple as like someone texted me a thing, so automatically add the thing they texted to my calendar, like that is technically like an AI use case, and you don't need to like send that off to the cloud for that to happen. We've seen some of the Apple Intelligence, albeit they landed really, really muted for most people, just being like very invisible UX integrations effectively. And I think in the edge AI sort of argument, like it's one good for Apple to be playing the way that they are and letting everyone else kind of absorb the issues of solving economic value, whereas their cost of AI dev is effectively just like how much does this hardware sell for? Like how much does the RAM stick in the iPhone cost and call it a day? I just don't think yet anyone has cracked like how to make like a consumer AI product that like gets people really, really excited. Like I don't think that's happened yet. In the shape of like it would push someone to buy a new iPhone with the best hardware to achieve this use case. Like I don't think that's on the horizon or like predictable for anybody just yet.
Yeah, both of these feel very much in progress. Like there'll be more to say about them in a month or a year, something like that. Like I don't the legal proceedings as far as the IP, leak or whatever, and them running afoul of kind of exit conditions, etc. That's number one. I think predictable, like Lakshya said, but then also number two, it's a fairly well established Apple playbook to go through this suing motion, clawing back, seeing where the edges of their patent fences actually are from a legal standpoint, because it sets a precedent for them in the go forward. So I think in both cases, fairly predictable. We'll see if it means any material slowdowns for OpenAI. I find it interesting. I think that people have taken this kind of approach for OpenAI, and I think that there was a misstep in OpenAI's construction of their roadmap covering as much surface area as it did, because
Mm,
it left them vulnerable for these things. I also think that by pioneering these different vectors, right, namely large language models, this nonprofit plus for profit construction from the beginning, the hardware, those kind of things, as they go down each one of these paths, they're stepping on all the rakes, and so there will be fast follows from all these different companies that want to go down this path. We saw similar kind of lawsuits coming from the other AI devices previously, right? Some of the rabbits and the other companies also got sued for patent infringement, not directly from like ripping it from ex Apple employees, but from overstepping some of the patent fences these hardware companies had. So like hardware's hard. There's only so many form factors that make sense. Patents in hardware are much more robust than they are in software. So you're going to have natural overlap, and there's just going to be more opportunities to sue. So again, we'll just kind of see how the details kind of come out. On the chip side, I had never put two and two together with respect to like if they were investing in self-driving cars, they would inevitably end up with a better AI chip. I think that's true. I think that makes a lot of sense. The question that I have is much to Lakshya's last point. I don't know yet if having the best local inference chip for Apple is going to actually lead to a material business benefit. It's unclear to me beyond interaction models, which we've spoken at length, where the real value is for consumer edge AI.
hmm
It seems very fleeting at best. And so in that respect, if anyone does win it, I would vote and bet Apple wins that. I just don't know how large a prize there is to be won down that particular path.
Yeah, like to me, like saying this is like I think the person who like is most enthusiastic about interaction models, just because again, like it's consumer, like it's all very like it's all AI technical and engineering hard while also being consumer. But therein lies the problem with that last word, in that like consumer doesn't make that much money when you look at the wider scope of things you could choose to do that are engineering hard. Like the shape of it has to be at some level like Siri all of a sudden becomes like a little like homunculus in your like pocket that can do everything. And to get that everything, you must pay for like the $2,000 iPhone, effectively.
Yeah.
Like That's the only way that that works. And I don't know like how much you can really achieve that pitch in like a year from now. If you get it, great. But also like Apple's a slow company that's like playing a very patient game. They're clearly investing a lot in their hardware, like the AI flywheel of their whole thing. And like I assume directionally they would love for Siri to be better. The problem is that like they live on a hardware context that's been constructed over like 20 something years with all of its different patterns and behaviors and all this other kind of stuff. And it just feels like, again, like if Siri were some sort of like magical like little gremlin genie that you could summon whenever and it would do anything, and that anything justified like we can sell you a $3,000 $2,000 iPhone because you need the chip that can run this Siri. Ta-da, now it's justified. Until that point,
I'm going to take another point of view on this. I think an always-on Mac Mini, like people like me, I've got a Mac Mini, I've got a MacBook, I've got an iPhone, I've got an Apple Watch. Like an always-on version of all those devices with just a back and forth conversation. Like most people aren't directing their Hermes or their Claw to go do a bunch of coding tasks. Like that's not what most human beings would use it for. Most Apple users, all that most Apple users want to be able to do is ask questions. Hey, remind me of this. I've got a doctor's appointment tomorrow. I've got medication to take at 9 a.m. Like it's much more mundane. A small model with better on device AI inference, I think solves that problem really well with a few tweaks of like, always on and ambient, like listening to you when you want to talk. You just talk. And I feel like Apple is the closest company to Jarvis that any company is today, much closer than OpenAI.
I think
hang on. Two things, I guess. Number one, why does that need a chip unlock? And then number two, why does Siri suck so bad?
Yeah, I mean, replacing Siri, while the reputation is horrible, but the changing Siri, it's not that big of a deal, right? Like Apple could train a model and change Siri. Like regular college students are training their own small models now, so it's not that big of a deal to train a new model. It's what do you actually need it to do? If it's not long-running coding tasks or something like that, if it's more mundane, deal with my calendar and my email and reminders, take a bunch of notes, transcribe a call for me, all that stuff is very doable, and that's the 80-20 in the Apple world.
I think to the wider point of like how do you get that to so one, we're seeing models approaching the point that like even though like the idea of like an always on like full duplex interaction model has a lot of issues with like context loss and how long it can run for. Like the context window is the big problem there. But insofar as like what you tell the consumer they're upgrading for or what their chip needs to be able to do, I think the problem is that like the average consumer, like someone who gets excited about the next iPhone, you go, okay, yeah, no worries. The average consumer who's getting excited about the next iPhone is not getting excited about like, you've made my email more efficient. Like that's just not that sexy of a use case generally, nor is meeting note taking. Like it's all good for the productive member of society, and that's fine. But that's not something that like will bring droves of people to like the next Apple announcement, right? Like if I look back to like things that have gotten people really, really excited, like the first Siri was like novel science back in the day, right? There was stuff like removing like Face ID, right? Face ID was like very exciting to a lot of people because you're changing the entire like modality of authorizing whatever. And we've got inconveniences baked in, like how you pay, how you like stream, like how you connect to other Apple devices. It's just none of those right now. One, we haven't seen an interaction model or any sort of full duplex model like take market hold in some sort of like imaginative way that justifies creating novel chip architectures or even novel kernel architectures to make that run effectively in cloud or like in on-prem effectively, right? Like all these interaction models and everything are all already running on like gigantic GPUs, and they're getting used by a subset of people for translation or cooking or that sort of thing. Like just like it hasn't found its match generally yet that justifies pitching someone that they should be paying an extra $1,000 for a new chipset.
Right. Yeah. I wish Shashi would interrupt because I think there's an interesting lane on like again. I think he's exactly right in what he's saying with respect to the use case that Apple has a pretty clear advantage for, which is like the kind of always on, you know, glorified assistant kind of thing where it's managing my calendar, my emails, etc. I don't see that bottleneck though existing at the chip layer. I think the chips that
Mhm.
run on the iPhones right now are perfectly capable, in fact, far more so than what you need for that. The problem is, to your point, context loss and you need better software. Like Siri's not any good, and Siri's not any
Yeah.
good right now, in my opinion, because of not just the context window or whatever aperture being limited. It's because the iPhone is purposely walled. They
Yeah.
purposely lock privacy into these various walled rooms of the iPhone without kind of free floating access, which just by definition makes the context of the agent worse. And so I do
Yeah.
think there might be a way to do like unified memory on the
Yeah.
iPhone, where it's like the things you want that the agent to have context to, you can. But again, I don't see that as being bottlenecked by chip innovation. I see it as being
Right.
bottlenecked by software at the moment. So we'll see.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, with the software argument, I mean, we're just seeing a lot of this where, especially with, and you and I have talked about this, how like the bottleneck on like most inference is just always like this like memory, like the decode steps, right? Like how do you retrieve memory? Um, and even at the level of like if you go deep enough, like a lot of these neural chips that exist on the iPhone have like embedded like compute, embedded like CPU, embedded graphics, that sort of stuff, right? Like they're already doing a lot of like really nice mixed architectures on these singular M series chips. But getting those to the capacity that like again, if we're going to assume a full duplex model that's always on and running all the time, like one, the iPhone as a device is not really designed to be storing that much information or compressing it all the time. Two, most of the use cases that people have for like efficiency gain things, you've said this yourself, like for the most part, you're running crons for your automations, right? Like you're not like keeping an always on anything because there's not really need. Even Hermes and OpenClaw are fundamentally just crons, right? They're not passively like perceiving machines. Um, and it takes like the discovery of like a inverted use case to justify that all of a sudden, and then you get to justify like unlock the walled garden that exists on every single application inside of our piece of hardware. um that without that, it's just really hard to like make a really solid use case for like when someone cracks like a hero use case for an interaction model. I'm sure Apple will swoop in and try to like figure out how to deploy that. Great. But until that point, like it's just really hard to like make proper sense of per
Mhm.
se.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think this also circles back to where we started this conversation on the economic path. And like, I don't think people are actually willing to pay for that always on assistant. I think the
Yeah.
reason that Siri sucks is because there's no economic incentive to make it better. People are not buying
Yeah.
iPhones for Siri. People are not buying Androids for the Google Assistant equivalent. People just don't really care that much about their voice assistant on their devices because, to your point, the killer use case doesn't seem to exist yet.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe when it does, then all of a sudden that economic incentive flips completely, and you see Apple taking almost a runaway lead with it. Not the tangent at all, but I'd be much more curious about how Apple is thinking about memory. Like we know there's
Mm.
price hikes coming to the iPhone because of these price hikes on the
Yeah.
memory layer. I'm
RAM.
very curious if
Yeah.
they're going to try to vertically integrate into that layer next, like they did
Yeah.
with the Intel chip, like replace, as they did with the M chips, they replaced the Intel chips. I'm wondering if they're working to replace whatever their memory providers are. I don't know if it's who it is, Samsung or Micron, or who, I'm not sure who the provider for Apple is.
Yeah, it's an interesting prompt. I mean, we'll probably leave it there, but you're like, I'm actually like saying you're actually wondering like the RAM shortage has to exist at some bottleneck fundamentally. Like, what's the like component that is bottlenecked underneath all of the RAM shortages? That I realize like I just actually don't understand. I'm just kind of taking for granted that RAM is supply constrained in some capacity, but I don't know why. So maybe worth diving into before we meet up next time. I'll hopefully be educated on it because bothering me that I don't actually know the answers to that question. Okay, so we'll leave it there. Thank you all for joining. We'll catch you all soon enough. See you.